Hi, my name is Min Carrico, and I'm a faculty and co-chair of the Visual Arts at Edmonds Community College. Today we'll be talking with Michael Wewer about his upcoming exhibit at the college, Wide Spaces of the Northwest. The exhibit opens September 27th, and we'll have a reception on October 18th. Today we're going to talk to Michael about his black and white photographs and his explorations in the Pacific Northwest and taking photographs in some far remote places around the area. Welcome, Michael. Thank you.
Hi there. How you doing?
Good, good. Well, can you tell us a little bit about your project and overall?
What I've been working on, and it's kind of encompassed a long journey because I started way back in '93, actually, and I basically been putting together these images and, you know, trying to pull together all these places that are wilderness and protected and national parks and just, you know, encompass the whole area that I feel like should be protected. And it kind of ranges from southern Alaska all the way to southern California, which some people would say is a stretch to the northwest, but I'm just kind of going with it and expanding the borders a little bit. So, and it's all shot with black and white film, and I've just been kind of trying to collect all the work together, and it's probably going to come out in a couple of series, but this will be the first time I've ever shown it.
Oh, excellent. So you said you started this project in 1993, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the whole inspiration for starting this project?
Well, I basically just picked up photography, and I worked with Martin Lim, who used to teach here, and I started working in the national park in Yellowstone, and that basically, you know, just started off everything for me. And then when I went off to Western, a guy by the name of Michael Frome basically instilled all this idea of wilderness and protection and environmentalism in me, and I just kind of continued with the project and started, you know, building up all these images that I've worked on over the years, and then I came across a book that's basically written about the wilderness and all the projected areas. So, and that's kind of what started the whole ball rolling with it.
Right, right. So you're basically carrying on a long tradition of photographers such as Ansel Adams or Edward Weston, who are photographing, you know, the American landscape and call into action and activism to protect these areas.
Yeah, and it's a big deal because, I mean, everybody thinks about, you know, they don't really think forward. They always think of, well, there's trees there and I can cut them and use them. And they don't really think about the impacts that we have on spaces. And, you know, the more we take up all the resources that are right there for us, it's fine and we utilize them, but a lot of times they don't think about the beauty of these places and, you know, the other uses that they have, because you can go there and just get totally lost and, you know, have a total tranquil area, just, you know, give you a peace of mind, and those are the things that a lot of people forget about.
And you've covered, so let me, you covered California, Washington, of course, Oregon, Idaho, and where else?
A little bit in Montana.
Okay.
And one of the ones that I would say started the whole thing is an image from the Grand Tetons. And didn't bring it with me today, but it'll be one that we'll show. And it's a really neat shot, shot with plus X of all things, with a K1000. And basically, I don't think I could get back up to that spot because I pretty much hiked 18 miles that day, and I don't think I can do that now that I'm getting older. And so it's a really cool shot, and it means a lot to me. And that's kind of where it got started, and that's over in the Grand Tetons in Wyoming. So.
Right. And you mentioned earlier about the Pentax K1000 and the Plus X, and for those of you who are tuning in, and we're talking about black and white photography, traditional black and white photography, wet lab, dark room, you know, this whole process of physical, you know, actual chemicals. And for those who technically, a K1000 is, what some would call a student camera, and Plus X is a type of film that's fairly slow as far as the recording process. So is that the kind of film and camera that you were using in college at Western?
It's what I started out with.
Yeah.
And it's the classic student camera. It basically is all manual and mechanical. You can hit it on a rock and it'll still keep going. And it just takes a little watch battery. So, I started out with that, and then of course I moved up to an autofocus camera down the road because they became available. And then, just kept rolling with it.
So you're using multiple different formats, correct? So you're using start off with K1000 and then an autofocus camera and other cameras you're using?
Yeah. So basically, I had back then a 35 millimeter Pentax system, and then as I progressed and got more into it, I stepped up to a larger format, which was a Pentax 6.7, and I still have it today. And that camera does a 6x7 centimeter medium format image, and it just does beautiful work. It's just a lot heavier to carry around. It's about, with the lenses, it's about 6 or 7 pounds that you're adding to your backpack to go anywhere. And so the images that it puts out is pretty amazing.
Right. And for those of you, a 6.7 centimeter is approximately 2.25 by 2.5, give or take a little bit, as far as like a negative size. So you get the bigger negatives. And why did you move to the bigger negatives?
Just because a lot of the availability of film was going by the wayside. And basically, when I started out, I wanted to go with the slowest possible film, which gave me the finest grain and enlarged it the greatest. But as I got going, every film that I used became unavailable. And so I kept having to figure out a new film, and then I had to switch gears and then just decided to get a medium format camera just because that's what I always wanted anyway in the beginning. So,
But you're not shooting like a 4x5 or 8x10 like Ansel Adams or Edward Weston in that fashion.
No. I stuck with medium format just because it's more compact. 4x5 and 8x10 cameras are incredible and beautiful cameras, but it was just a lot easier for me to work with a Pentax 6.7 just because of the ease of the use of the camera and all that.
Right. So it's really about practicality and having to carry all this stuff yourself in some instances.
Yeah, and a 4x5 would be a great camera, but for me it was just a lot easier to use a 6.7.
Right. Yeah, unless you get a mule like Ansel Adams, because oftentimes he went backcountry, we had a mule packing all of his equipment and his camping gear and his food and everything.
Yeah, and his work is just amazing.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let's start talking a little bit about your work here. Michael's brought in some prints. We're going to talk a little bit about the print quality as well, and some of the details about these areas. Now, the thing about photography that we've always admired is a lot of times it's not just the image itself. It's always about the technical process of printing it or photographing it and stuff like that. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of these images. And first off, we're going to talk about a pair of aspen trees. Is that the correct title?
Yep.
So we have a pair of aspen trees that we're looking at, and the amount of detail that you render. And can you tell us a little bit about the technical aspects of how you made this image?
And basically, with this shot, I'm basically printing it straight and then kind of figuring out the times, which in darkroom terms, you're basically just figuring out what you're, with the test strip, where you're going to be working with the image. And with this particular shot, we basically burned and dodged specific areas, and you needed to bring in detail in the grass, and so you had to add light there. And then with the aspens, it was really important that they pop out with the evergreens behind it. So the aspens are basically at the front of the image, and then not being taken away from the highlights coming off of the evergreens in the background.
Right. And this is, he also told me that this was actually shot with 35 millimeter film, right?
It is.
Right.
And a lot of people, when they first look at it, can't tell. And for me, it was always about the film that kind of created the image. And of course, you know, the person behind the camera has a little bit to do with it too, but if you get the right film and you know what you're doing with it, you can actually expand it beyond its capabilities. And, you know, it's not going to be as good as a 4x5 image, but it's pretty close.
Right. Yeah, it holds there's a lot of detail that's you know, rendered really well at this size, because if you think about, you know, for those of you, if you think about a 35 millimeter negative, it's only like an inch at the longest side, and then you're taking that and making it 20 times bigger.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when you do that with film, you lose quality because there's only so much information on that little small negative. But you've rendered a great deal of quality just by the chemical process.
Yeah, and that's,
yeah.
you know, and for me, a lot of people feel like, you know, you can't, you can replicate it with digital, and you probably could these days. There's a lot of people that have mastered that, but there's a little bit more craftsmanship with actually printing it in the darkroom for me.
And are you going digital at any point
with
this project?
This is always going to be, the only way that this is actually going to go digital is if one of the negatives that I have gets to the point where it needs to be scanned and I don't want to print it from the enlarger, which means it is technically going to be printed digitally, but it's still coming from film originally.
Originally, then to be scanned and then put it in the computer, and then you would have to manipulate it and dodge and burn it in computer,
right?
Much like how you did it in print. So you have to replicate all of that in Photoshop.
Yeah.
Right. No, the amount of detail that's in here in this image that we're talking about is really like in the shadow areas behind the aspen trees that you can still see the fence line, the wooden fence line that's built back there. It has that detail that we can actually, you know, count how many, you know, logs there are. You can see how many segments there are of the fence line. You can still see parts of the evergreen trees in the shadow areas. And that's something that is a craftsmanship, like you said.
Yeah,
and I admire that.
Yep.
Especially like, you know, and when we talk about in Photoshop, you know, there's basically anything in Photoshop is derived from traditional black and white printing.
Right.
Making areas darker, making areas lighter.
Yeah.
You know, all those little things are based off of your work. So you do hand print these, right?
Yep.
In a darkroom. And
at a time when I was up in Bellingham and going to school at Western, I went out to a friend's place. He was kind of my mentor. He was out in a really small town out by Mount Baker, and he just had the coolest setup, and I'd go out there for weekends and work with him, and that's where I learned all of my printing techniques. And his name's Gary Meter, and he used to print up in Bellingham. The other place that I go now is on Vashon, and I work with a friend of mine named David Lynch. Not the film director David Lynch, but
who is from Washington, by the way.
He is from Washington.
For those who don't know.
But the poor guy, his name's David Lynch, and he's an incredible friend, but when you pull up his name, you're always going to get the film director.
Right.
And he's got these beautiful black and white images of all over places, and he just lets me hang out in his dark room all weekend and get stuff done. So,
So how often do you go out to these areas? I mean,
usually I'll plan trips, and then I'll take students tagging along with me on occasion, and that happens twice a month. And then during breaks from the quarters, I'll take off for probably 2 weeks and just with the destination in mind, and then I'll scout the area and then shoot for 2 or 3 days. And sometimes I backpack in, and sometimes it's just driving by, wow, that's cool, I need to get back here at the right time of the light, and then I'll go shoot it too.
Right.
So some of it involves a lot of backcountry hiking, which is slowing down a little bit, but a lot of it is just driving up and seeing these beautiful places and
Right.
pulling it out. And
Do
taking a
you
shot.
visit place again? Do you come back and revisit?
All the time, because you never know. Like this shot wouldn't have been this shot in the spring.
The aspen tree shot. Yeah.
Right, because the aspens are just in full, bright yellow. It could be a cool shot in the winter. You never know.
Right.
And so you do have to go back, and then you have to go back and see where the light falls, and then it could be really cool on a cloudy day versus a sunny day.
Right.
And then a few of the other images that we're going to show exemplify why you have to be there, and it's all luck in what the sky gives you.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the sky doesn't give you anything, it's just going to be blank dark blue, which in black and white terms is like a charcoal gray,
Right.
and that's not too exciting.
Right.
So sometimes you do have to go back to get the right weather, or you might want to get something like the moon coming up. You never know. So you do go back to these places, and sometimes it takes you 2 to 3 days just to get to the spot, and then you've put all that energy out to get there, and the weather doesn't cooperate, and so then you got to go back.
Right.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, a lot of those, those famous, we've seen those famous photographs for out in Yosemite and all those areas. It's the art of photography is a lot about patience and about waiting for the right cloud to be there, or waiting for clouds, or waiting for the moon, or waiting for the sun, or waiting for the clouds to clear.
Yeah.
And I think that's very evident in not only the printing process, because that's again another act of patience of dodging, burning, lighting, and darkening parts of the picture, but even standing there waiting for the image to appear. Like this one here. This is the this image is entitled. Give us the title again. This one.
Painted Hills.
Yep, Painted Hills over in
John
Oregon.
Day Wilderness. Yep.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, and what you're talking about is the clouds that are rolling in. So did you wait long for these clouds to roll in, or?
I've been there probably 15 times,
Mm-hmm.
and every time you get something different, and it was just a matter of chance.
Mm-hmm.
I could say that I waited hours and hung out there and just, I waited for the cloud. But in
Right.
reality, I just drove up. I hiked up to the top of the spot there where I wanted to be, and it just happened to show up that way.
Yeah, and that's again part of that luck and part of the timing
Yep.
for everything. And I thought what I find interesting in your work right now, it's about these places that we need to protect and we have a deep connection to, is that not only that they are both the pair of aspens and then the Painted Hills image, you include parts of man-made.
Right.
And why is that? Why? Because in both of these pictures, so the pair of aspens that we looked at earlier, it has a man-made wooden fence,
Uh-huh.
and then in the Painted Hills, right at the bottom,
Yep.
there is looks like a barbed wire fence. And why do you include that part? Because you can easily move the camera and crop it out, or crop
Right.
it in printing.
Well, with the aspen shot, it is right on the edge of where the Boulder White Cloud Wilderness is, and fences is a big part of man to protect ourselves from everything that's out in the wild, because back in the day, you had to protect your piece of property with a fence. And it's almost ironic or odd that now we're protecting our wilderness areas from us with a fence.
Right.
Is kind of what I'm trying to, either on purpose or accidental, come across. Because this is basically not supposed to be tramped on by people anywhere in here. And
Inside the Painted Hills, that area.
yeah, it's not supposed to be, you're not supposed to walk up there. I don't think they care if wildlife does, but as far as people go, you're not supposed to be tramping around in there. And they will let photographers go in and do stuff with specific workshops.
Sure.
But in my mind, the fence kind of protects the wilderness from us,
Right.
rather than what we've all grown up to live by is creating a fence to protect us from the wild on
Right.
the outside.
Right. And Do you write about this? Because circling back to your mentor, Michael Fromm, from Western, do you write about this? Do you have a narrative about these areas and about what you're trying to protect and what you're trying to achieve with these images?
I wrote a thesis when I was in college. It was an undergrad thesis for environmental history that had to do with a specific area that was around the same idea, but I didn't have any plans of writing anything with these particular prints. And the thesis paper was about a place up on Vancouver Island called Clayoquot Sound. And basically it's all about the commons and having a common place for all people to utilize. But if any one group of people or person overutilizes that piece of land, it ruins it for everybody. And it was called Garrett Hardin's Tragedy of Commons. That was what my whole thesis was based on. And so I have done stuff in the past, but I'm not planning on writing anything about it in the future with this stuff. Finding somebody to collaborate with would be a really good idea, but I haven't really come up with anything yet.
Yeah, no, we as artists, we tend to get caught up in our process and what we're doing, and the writing component has to come either sometime during the middle or sometimes even later, after the body of work has been assembled. How many images do you have in this collection right now that you're going to exhibit, and then are you exhibiting everything in your collection at our gallery?
It's going to be close to 20 prints, but I have to space everything out, and it could be a little bit less than that because I don't want to overwhelm the room with too many. And they pretty much span all of the states that we've talked about, with the exception of Alaska, which I haven't ventured up to yet. And that's kind of down the road, but it's such a far away area and harder to get to compared to everything else I've done.
So now, some of these lands, are they Forest Service lands? Are they park lands? What's some of the different designations for these properties?
The Painted Hills is basically within what you would call a wilderness area. It's John Day Wilderness, and it actually has a lot of archaeological and other things going on with it that totally protects it. And then you'll find other images are going to be from national parks, which are also protected. And then there are some that are kind of on the cusp of being protected. The Boulder White Cloud, which is this one, there's two images from the Boulder White Cloud Wilderness, is kind of being thought about as expanding, but you never know if it's going to get bigger, and that's kind of the idea behind these photos, is showing you places that are on the edge of the wilderness, and because basically a lot of the stuff is constantly changing. So you'll have certain people in office that want to expand these areas, and then it'll contract when the political ideas change. So if you get somebody that's more conservative, you're going to see them wanting to utilize these areas for resources, and so the wilderness areas get shrunk, and then they expand when you get other people putting money into them.
Right. And do you have access, or are you gaining access to some of like the wilderness lands? Because you can't just walk up and drive in. You have to actually have permission to go in. Are you looking to get deeper into the backcountry for some of these areas that are restricted from humans?
Yeah, that's the idea. You go in, you give them ample opportunity to know that you're going to be venturing in there, and that's basically just working with the Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service. National parks are never that really big of a deal. You have full access anyway. You just have to stay off. You can't trample on certain trails and stuff like that.
Right, or go off trail that easily.
Yeah. And a lot of these places I can drive in and get to the spot, and then I have to get a permit to hike in. So that's all that entails.
So there is some level of going through bureaucracy, red tape, and to get access. And
yeah, a lot of times there is.
Yeah.
Painted Hills, for example, isn't one. But some parts of the Boulder White Cloud would be, And then Leslie Gulch is full access too.
Well, yeah. And speaking of Leslie Gulch, well, let's go to that image real quick. I mean, this is another example of, you know, that timing in the clouds. So you said you didn't have to have special access to this one. This is a drive-up scene.
Totally drive-in.
Yeah.
It's one of those areas that's recreational and then wilderness right side by side, which kind of they work together, and then they are kind of conflicting, because if you're driving all these recreational vehicles, then you know the wilderness people are like, oh, you're going to hurt this, hurt that. But this one in particular, I drove in and found the spot that I wanted to hang out, and just totally parked, threw out my sleeping bag, and then got up right early in the morning, and then this is what I woke up to. And sometimes it's that cool and that easy, but you never know what's going to happen. It could be totally socked in and not get anything, so you never know.
Yeah, I mean, again, you know, talking about the craftsmanship of printing, it's like there's a lot of like great shadow details in the lower left corner, where you can still see, like, you know, the plants and the shrubbery, and you see the edges of the cloud that's along the rock formation, and you know, and again, you have on the right side, lower right side, where you can see that detail. And then the craftsmanship I appreciate about your work is that, you know, clouds are not pure white, even though we see them as white clouds, but clouds have this beauty of various shades of gray, from white to, you know, to a lighter gray, and you kept that detail. You know, it's easy to lose that detail. And have you shot some of the same images here with digital, or is it strictly all film? Do you do a side-by-side comparison?
These ones, this one in particular, I was strictly on film. I've been to the Painted Hills and shot with digital, and I haven't gone back with my latest camera, which is up next. But like Leslie Gulch, I've only been there once, and that's what I ended up with. And I was shooting chrome film, which is like color slide film, and then black and white. I didn't shoot any digital at that time.
And so you are shooting some color occasionally to add to it. So basically you have the opportunity to shoot black and white at the time, and then color, so you can have side-by-side comparison.
Yeah, and it's funny, I don't know if you feel this way, but I see in black and white better than I do in color. And I still can't figure out where that comes from. But, you know, for me, when I look at a scene, I'm always thinking black and white. And I can shoot color, but for me, it's a strange phenomenon. And I don't know if I'm just locked in, but I know that personally I'm better at black and white than I'm at color. And that's my strength. And it doesn't mean that I love the darkroom. It just means that I see in black and white better.
Sure.
Yeah, you know, and with color is great. I think it's beautiful, but I don't know.
Yeah.
And this image here was beautiful in color too, but it doesn't pop like the black and white.
And I think I think for a perception as for the audience, is sometimes there's this timelessness for a black and white image. It's like color is in some ways fleeting. That we see every color, we see everything in color, and then it's just like, well, yeah, it's a blue sky. See it every day.
Yeah.
You know, well, in this area, not every day, but most of the time, you know what a blue sky is like. But I think there's a quality about black and white that captures the imagination of the viewer.
Yep.
And some people do see better in color, and I for one, can see better in color now than black and white. I used to see black and white a lot, but I think if I went back, I could probably get back into black and white.
Right.
But color is more my narrative now, and at the time I was never interested in color. And I think it's something that's very personal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's next on your horizon for this project?
Trying to get venturing up to Alaska and hitting some of the other spots, because there's a lot of areas that I still want to go to, and venturing into a lot of the national parks in California, and you know, there's just trying to set everything up in a timeline to where I can get to these places. And it just takes time, but eventually I want to get there. So
Yeah. Would this ever expand to across the United States?
it could, but what's interesting is that almost all of the wilderness is west of the Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as you go east of the Mississippi, there is areas that are protected, but it's really, really limited compared to what's over here.
Right.
And that is not to say that I would like to, but time is kind of part of the problem there. So,
Right. Yeah. So, and this is, well, thank you very much, Michael, for coming by and talking to us
yeah,
about
this is
your
great.
upcoming exhibit. Again, this is Michael Wewer. His exhibit, Wide Spaces of the Northwest, opens on September 27th at the College Art Gallery. The reception is October 28th, or no, I'm sorry, October 18th is when the reception will be, and he'll be there to talk about his prints and to give more details about some of the other images that are in the collection. Again, Michael Wewer does teach for the college. He teaches black and white photography, of all things. Black and white wet lab, we still have a wet lab on campus, and he teaches almost every quarter for us. And so this is the first time, I believe, we're featuring your work in the gallery.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you.
We look forward to seeing your work in September.
Great, thanks.
Thanks.
All right.